I think that's right. Yes, everybody. Hello, how are you? Today is 9/6/2023, September 6, 2023. So summer's over, Labor Day's over, and we are at the beginning of, I guess, the next busy part of the year, right? So remember, September 11th happened this time of year. So let's, God bless, please, nothing else like that happen. However, so I haven't filmed in a while. A couple things. I don't like filming as far as the UFO stuff is concerned for no information out there, right? There's basically the same thing has been going on, as we know. So anybody that's followed my channel before can go back and watch the video. So my daughter said I shouldn't repeat myself from old videos. my advisor. So today's video is going to be about how I connected the dots for how crooked our government really is. Meaning so we know we have two governments, right? We have the shadow government, which if you watch the movie Unacknowledged, which I've recommended highly to everybody, it's even in my streaming down the bottom. As you know, Dr. Greer, I support him wholeheartedly, and that movie is the one that will explain the best, to my opinion, the secrecy and the UFO stuff going on, in the U.S. Congress right now. So if you want to get caught up, start watching that movie, and then just start watching these other movies, and you'll be really better off for it, in my opinion. But you do what you want. So during that, when I first watched Unacknowledged in 2017, I was blown away, and then I started to really look at how crooked our government really be. Like, can they really have lied to us like this? I can't believe it, right? I was a Marine, I served, I still believe in America, but that doesn't mean I believe in the people running it, you know what I mean? And we have too many crooked, rich politicians that, try to make decisions for us from their castles, which to me is BS. So, but that's what this is about, the truth and love, right? So Unacknowledged, as I was saying, started me down my rabbit hole and started me to question the establishment, right? So that's why I say, anybody who knows The Matrix would understand why I say Dr. Greer is my Morpheus, right? But if you don't, watch it. It's a good movie. So after Unacknowledged, I started to really think about how corrupt our government really is, and it started to bring me back to, once you start to learn about the whole Roswell situation and the cover-up from there on, it starts there, right? But there's some significant events throughout our history as Americans that I think I want to bring to light for you guys to watch. So one thing is going to be, the first thing is going to be the Eisenhower speech about his the military-industrial complex. So, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is because that was the first president that where the control from the president being the man who knows everything and how everything should go through him, to where he lost it, and he knew it. And if you listen to the speech very carefully at the end of his, and it's in the movie Unacknowledged, I believe, he talks about how, the military-industrial complex, we need to protect against it. So anybody who thinks that we're on the wrong side, me, you, and the people listening to this, who believe we're the patriots. Don't forget it, okay? Hashtag peaceful revolution. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
And farewell.
Did not get very much attention. When a new president is coming to power, as John Kennedy was, the spotlight was not on Dwight Eisenhower.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions.
There was a feeling at the time that this must have been written by some speechwriter who just sneaked into the speech.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
3 months ago, we got contacted by a family up in Minnesota saying that we have documents from Malcolm Moose. He was responsible in part for drafting the military-industrial complex speech.
These new papers give us written evidence that this was not just some caprice of Eisenhower's or something by some speechwriter.
You see the evolution of his speech from May 1959 to 1961.
And he wanted to give this speech for a long time, 2 years.
Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea.
There was one person in Dwight Eisenhower's life whom he really confided almost everything to, and that was his brother Milton.
There's one particular document where the speechwriters had already drafted their version of the speech, only to see Milton come along and totally revamp had already been written.
When Milton Eisenhower was taking notes and writing things on the drafts of these speeches, the speechwriters knew that it wasn't Milton talking, it was Ike.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
He would see magazines with advertisements for some new warplane or some bomb, and he got so angry he'd take the magazine and throw it into the fireplace of the Oval Office because he felt that defense spending should not be something that would be encouraged by companies who are seeking commercial gain.
We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
There is an interesting document. It shows that the farewell speech would be made to Congress. But yet, President Eisenhower decided, no, he was going to address the people.
Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
One test of how well a president speaks is how long the speech lives. Here we are 50 years later, we're still talking about this speech.
Now, on Friday noon, I am to become a private citizen. I am proud to do so. I look forward to it. Thank you, and good night.
All right, so the reason why I played that is because, first of all, it's an amazing speech, right? Dwight Eisenhower. I played that whole 3-minute clip because I think it was valuable information to anybody who... I like to provide proof and, sound evidence when I'm saying things. I don't want just people to take my word for things. I want them to understand that I believe them. And the reason why I believe them is because I've seen the proof and I'm not just making up things, okay? So Dwight D. Eisenhower, during his farewell speech, gave that warning about the military-industrial complex. And the reason why I'm talking about that is because that leads into my whole what's happening now with the government, how the government broke off into two parts, the shadow government, right, which is the military-industrial complex. There's two sides of it, though, right? There's the legal military-industrial complex, which is, I know this is hard to follow, which is the government contractors that are building our bombs and building our tanks and, doing all the, the warmongers and stuff, right? That's the legal that we actually pay them, the real people. And then there's the same companies who actually have a secret side of them that are harboring this black secret UFO and alien technology that can save the world, right? So that's where the reason why I'm talking about this, because there's two sides of the government, and what really shed light on the corruption of the government for me was this was when I started to follow that, like, the rabbit hole. And this President Eisenhower speech kind of like was like when the presidents, when the government branched off into, that was the moment when it branched off into the legal government with secrecy and compartmentalization, and then the shadow, deep black state government where the president lost control, and he knew it because it went corporate, and he knew that there was no way that he was trying to warn us. He was trying to tell us to be patriots and to be aware of what's going on. And dude, think about that. That president gave that over 50 years ago. It's insane. Think about it. It's amazing. True American, true hero. So I just wanted you to hear that. Next thing we're going to talk about is how it leads to. So from that point on, the government became more and more compartmentalized. Now, if you want to watch just watch Unacknowledged. I also did a little abbreviated video on Unacknowledged in my last video from Stephen Greer, and I think that can really put a light on the shadow government and how it evolved. But my point is, I want to lead to something called the Petrodollar. I don't know if everybody knows what that is, right? So the petrodollar is what backs the U.S. currency throughout the world, right? So I don't know if everybody remembers or knows that our currency used to be backed by gold. From the old saying, Fort Knox, we used to have all our gold in one place and all that stuff. Well, at one point, it became unfathomable for us to grow as a nation industrially and to back everything by gold. So that came up with a new solution. So in the 60s, Henry Kissinger came up with the petrodollar idea, right? It's actually a brilliant idea when you think about it. He said, we'll use oil and we'll convince the world that oil can only be sold in American dollars, right? Think about that. So no matter where it's brought out of the ground, the oil in the world is only sold in US dollars. No matter where it is, Russia, China, Middle East, right? Everywhere. So think about how is that even possible, right? So if I was one of those countries, I'd be pissed, just in general. But so somehow we convinced the world that's what OPEC's all about, the G20 summits, all those good things. And that's why this whole BRICS thing that's going on in the news is a big problem, because they're trying to push the American dollar as off the standard as the oil standard, right? Which, whatever. I know it will affect our economy deeply, but I just don't understand how we got away with it for so long. But anyway, so we convinced the people, the world, to only sell their oil in dollars. That's still the only way it is right now, legally, right? And Saddam, at one point, said he was going to sell the Iraqi oil in his own money. And guess what? I wonder why we invaded him, huh? I'm going to show you some videos about that are going to blow your mind about the whole petrodollar. And then eventually I'm going to show you a video about Iraq and what really happened there the first time, and leading up to the military-industrial complex in its current state. Okay, so hang tight.
In 1945, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world reserve currency, which meant that international commodities were priced in dollars. The agreement, which gave the United States a distinct financial advantage, was made under the condition that those dollars would remain redeemable for gold at a consistent rate of $35 per ounce. The United States promised not to print very much. In 1945, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world reserve. These were priced in dollars. The agreement, which gave the United States a distinct financial advantage, was made under the condition that those dollars would remain redeemable for gold at a consistent rate of $35 per ounce. The United States promised not to print very much money, but this was on the honor system, because the Federal Reserve refused to allow any audits or supervision of its printing presses. In the years leading up to 1970, expenditures in the Vietnam War made it clear to many countries that the U.S. was printing far more money than it had in gold. And in response, they began to ask for their gold back. This, of course, set off a rapid decline in the value of the dollar. The situation climaxed in 1971 when France attempted to withdraw its gold and Nixon refused.
I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
This was obviously not a temporary suspension, as he claimed, but rather a permanent default. And for the rest of the world who had entrusted the United States with their gold, it was outright theft. In 1973, President Nixon asked King Faisal of Saudi Arabia to accept only US dollars as payment for oil and to invest any excess profits in US Treasury bonds, notes, and bills. In return, Nixon offered military protection for Saudi oil fields. The same offer was extended to each of the world's key oil-producing countries, and by 1975, every member of OPEC had agreed to only sell their oil in US dollars. The act of moving the dollar off of gold and tying it to foreign oil instantly forced every oil-importing country in the world to start maintaining a constant supply of Federal Reserve paper. And in order to get that paper, they would have to send real physical goods to America. This was the birth of the petrodollar. Paper went out, everything America needed came in, and the United States got very, very rich as a result. In November of 2000, Iraq began selling its oil exclusively in euros. This was a direct attack on the dollar and on U.S. financial dominance, and it wasn't going to be tolerated. In response, the U.S. government, with the assistance of the mainstream media, began to build up a massive propaganda campaign claiming that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and was planning to use them.
Should terrorists obtain these weapons, now being manufactured and traded around the world, the carnage they could inflict to our economies, our security, to world peace would be beyond our most vivid imagination. My judgment as Prime Minister is that this threat is real, growing, and of an entirely different nature to any conventional threat to our security that Britain has faced before.
In 2003, the US invaded, and once they had control of the country, oil sales were immediately switched back to dollars. This is particularly notable due to the fact that switching back to the dollar meant a 15 to 20% loss in revenue due to the euro's higher value. It doesn't make any sense at all unless you take the petrodollar into account.
So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
In Libya, Gaddafi was in the process of organizing a bloc of African countries to create a gold-based currency called the dinar, which they intended to use to replace the dollar in that region. US and NATO forces helped destabilize and topple the Libyan government in 2011.
Tonight, British forces are in action over Libya. They are part of an international coalition that has come together to enforce the will of the United Nations and to protect the Libyan people.
After taking control of the region, US armed rebels executed Gaddafi in cold blood and immediately set up the Libyan central bank. Iran has been actively campaigning to pull oil sales off of the dollar for some time now, and it has recently secured agreements to begin trading its oil in exchange for gold. In response, the US government, with mainstream media assistance, has been attempting to build international support for military strikes on the pretext of preventing Iran from building a nuclear weapon. In the meantime, they established sanctions which US officials openly admit are aimed at causing a collapse of the Iranian economy. Syria is Iran's closest ally, and they are bound by mutual defense agreements.
Russia, China, and Iran have all explicitly sided with the Syrian government. Russia is providing air support, advanced anti-aircraft missile systems, heavy weapons, and training. Iran, for its part, has troops on the ground. For the time being, China is more preoccupied with the ongoing tensions in the South China Sea and has not flexed its muscles in Syria as of yet. However, they should always be considered a wildcard variable. The current Iraqi government is also a wildcard. In 2015, they began to indicate where their loyalties lay in several meaningful ways. For example, they told the US government that new ground operations were not welcome, while at the same time announcing that they intend to look to Russia for military assistance. The list of countries pushing for regime change in Syria is a bit longer. United States, France, England, Germany, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar, Turkey, and Israel. If seeing all these characters in bed together strikes you as strange, looking at their motives will clarify things considerably. There isn't just one motive for this bloodbath. Rather, there's a matrix of motives which intersect in some rather odd places. Of course, money had to play a role. In 2009, Qatar put forth a proposal to build a natural gas pipeline which would have passed through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, to Turkey, and into Europe. The president of Syria, however, rejected this proposal. Instead, in 2011, he forged a pact with Iraq and Iran to run a pipeline eastward, cutting Qatar and Saudi Arabia out of the loop completely. It was around this time that jihadists began flooding into the region intent on ousting Assad. The West presented these groups as freedom fighters. Iran is Shia. The current government in Iraq is Shia and has strong ties with Iran. The pipeline deal which Assad accepted would strengthen the Shia bloc and expand its regional influence. The Sunnis don't like this. In fact, they've even coined a term to describe it, the Shia Crescent.
Let's be very clear. ISIS is not just a terrorist organization. It is a Sunni terrorist organization. That means it blocks and targets Shia. And that means it's serving the interests of Turkey and Saudi Arabia, even as it poses a threat to them. Because neither Turkey nor Saudi Arabia want an Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon bridge that isolates Turkey and cuts Saudi Arabia off.
Israel also doesn't like the Shia Crescent at all, and they have decided to work with the Sunnis to form a parallel bloc to counterbalance Iran's influence. This is why Israel has launched numerous airstrikes against the Syrian government over the years and has provided medical care, logistical support, and safe passage to known jihadists. In 2013, Israel's ambassador to the US, Michael Oren, told the Jerusalem Post that, quote, "The initial message about the Syrian issue was that we always wanted Bashar Assad to go. We always preferred the bad guys who weren't backed by Iran to the bad guys who were backed by Iran. This was the case," he said, "even if the other bad guys were affiliated to Al-Qaeda." Let that sink in for a moment. Now, at this point, if you were to ask any of these governments directly why they're arming and funding jihadists in Syria, they would claim that they are only supporting the moderate rebels, specifically the FSA.
We believe there are around 70,000 Syrian opposition fighters, principally the Free Syrian Army, who do not belong to extremist groups and with whom we can coordinate attacks on ISIL.
FSA commanders have gone on record to say that they cooperate with and conduct joint operations with al-Nusra, and ISIS and al-Nusra have officially formed alliances. And it is well established that the FSA command has been dominated by Islamic extremists for years.
He even claimed a 70,000 strong force of moderate FSA fighters were ready to coordinate action against ISIL with the Western Air Campaign. That claim has not remotely stood up to scrutiny. The FSA, which includes a wide range of groups, few, if any, would regard as moderate and mostly operate in other parts of the country. The only ground forces able to take advantage of a successful anti-ISIL air campaign are stronger jihadist and Salafist groups close to the ISIL-controlled areas.
And let's not forget about the oil. At this stage, ISIS has reached a point where it no longer needs direct sponsorship. The organization earns an estimated $1 to $2 billion a day through oil sales. The US was aware of this, but did nothing to stop it. They didn't even condemn the country which was facilitating the sale of this oil. Russia, on the other hand, began targeting oil convoys headed into Turkey in November of 2015. Shortly thereafter, Turkey shut down a Russian Su-24 that supposedly violated Turkish airspace for 17 seconds. In response, Russia released satellite evidence that they claim shows how Turkey is smuggling oil from ISIS. The US government dismissed this evidence, but didn't counter it with any evidence of their own. So where is the oil going?
All along, there's always been the idea that Turkey was supporting ISIS in some way. We know they've funneled people going through Turkey to ISIS. Someone's buying that oil that ISIS is selling. It's going through somewhere. It looks to me like it's probably going through Turkey. But the Turks haven't acknowledged that.
They knew, but they did nothing. Why? Well, let's ask Mike Morrell, former deputy director of the CIA.
There seemed to have been a judgment that, look, we don't want to destroy these oil tankers because that's infrastructure that's going to be necessary to support the people when ISIS isn't there anymore. And it's going to create environmental damage.
The United States and France are keen to make a show of airstrikes and special forces, but what they really want is the ability to operate in Syria militarily. This is the only way they'll have any chance of influencing the outcome. Trouble is, Russia is dug in. Unlike the United States and France, they have permission to operate in the country, and this has allowed them to set up bases and a strong anti-aircraft defense grid, which at any point can be used to enforce a no-fly zone. Washington is in a weak position. It can't really win from this angle, so they'll have to find a way to put Russia off balance and retake the momentum. It's important to remember the real stakes in this conflict. The West is in a state of decline. Their influence is waning. If the US and their allies fail to remove Assad from power, what they will be faced with is more than just a strong Shia crescent. If they fail, they risk being edged out of the entire region and replaced by Russia. This would give Russia an enormous amount of leverage in global energy markets. And this, of course, has serious implications for the petrodollar. For why? So expect the unexpected.
All right, so I played that whole video because I thought it was fascinating, right? To see, it's really disturbing to really think about how much the media has never let us see, right? You know, who knew all that information about the Middle East and what's going on with the petrodollar and how we're just, I mean, it's so. Now you understand why they want the American public to see how we operate and how we bully the world to make us to sell their oil in our dollars. The Iraq War, the reason why we invaded there is because Saddam was selling their oil in euros. I mean, so we made up BS about weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction took over the whole country, destabilized the whole region, people were starving. I mean, the amount of people that died for what? Because we are that greedy as a country. I mean, whatever. I'm still an American. Now, I don't believe that Americans as a whole, I mean, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution is what really, to me, this defines Americans, right? The crooked schmucks that let greed get to their minds, let take over their brains and hearts, aren't the ones that define us, right? So that's why I am still fighting, and I will still fight as a patriot, regardless of what anybody says, because the ones that are running the show right now are the crooked ones. So we got to keep doing our part, which is why I'm spreading this information, right? So that, so I'm gonna so that I'm glad. And two things, I'm glad that General Wesley Clark video was in there, because that's fascinating how they were talking about how they're going to take over 7 countries in 5 years, you know, and I mean, with the audacity of us to even think about such a thing, like who are we to say those things, right? And that video's been around a long time, so, but most people probably never heard it because I'm sure it's been blocked in most media outlets, right? So, and I apologize, I keep looking down, looking at my notes. I have a bunch of notes here. So, the next thing I want to talk about is I just want to play a Saddam video about how it's just an interesting video on YouTube that I found about Saddam and the whole situation with the oil and everything else. Okay, 1 second.
War was perceived by many as a move to have total control of the oil resources in the region and secure Washington's dominant role in formulating global energy policies. In October 2000, Saddam Hussein moved to switch Iraq's oil trade from the dollar to the euro. But the U.S. invasion of 2003 set the country's oil industry safely back into dollar denomination.
We are, as they say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
All right, so so I played the Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld's speech the day before 9/11, saying that we possibly can't track $2.3 trillion of funds going to the Department of Defense, right? And then the next day was 9/11. Were they connected? I don't know. Supposedly, there's a Joe Rogan clip where, if you want to see it, I could put a link to it, where it says that the planes crashed. Now, if I remember, I thought it was the 5th building that crashed in the afternoon. But I mean, I was obviously alive during 9/11. But that one of the planes crashed into the office where supposedly the records for those 2.3 trillion, whatever, blah, 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 was in. Now, I don't know if that's just a conspiracy theory or not, but I did hear that there was an FBI office in the other building, 5 World Trade or whatever, that fell in the afternoon, that was linked to cover up, but whatever. So regardless, point is how disturbing is all of it, right? Is how disgusting and how deep the shadow, dark, disgusting this goes from the manipulation from our government and everybody involved, right? So basically, it's about being aware you can't trust nothing, nobody, right? Because it's all just a cover up and nonsense, and somebody's getting paid in the end, right? It's all about money, right? So I just wanted to play that, and the whole Iraq thing is like insane, right? And it just goes to show you, the war in Ukraine. What's it really about? Is it about Russian oil, then about that Russia wants to sell oil in their own currencies, and who knows, right? I mean, are we really the good guys? Whatever, it doesn't matter. I know that our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence is the good guys, right? So enough said with that. Now, I want to play next video with So the point of this is that it's supposed to lead up to the secrecy and to the cover, right? So now we have the military arm, the defense contractors, right, that are building, bombs and tanks, everything else for our military, right? But how these wars that are out there that we're creating in the Middle East and in Ukraine and wherever else that we're creating these wars, are they really real wars, or are we just trying to be bullies and make people sell their oil in our currencies, right? What you think? And so then there's the other side, the illegal side of the government, which a lot of these companies that are the defense contractors also have control on the illegal side, which is the Raytheons, the Vanguards, and Lockheed, and Northrop Grumman, Boeing. They all have stuff. BlackRock's one of the biggest ones. Yeah, BlackRock has whatever. We'll talk about it in a second. So there's that whole other side, the deep, dark, black government that they hide under the cloak of secrecy. But these are all the illegal governments that are running the world. That are causing all the problems, and that are all linked to the petrodollar and the petroleum industry, which is really, to me, the biggest black mark or toxic influence on the whole world. Right, my opinion. And by this evidence, it's pretty obvious to me. So the next video I'm going to show is going to be a Joe Rogan interview with Patrick Dent, I believe his name is, and he's going to talk about about the current military-industrial complex and how influential they are, and about Raytheon and all those guys. And I'm going to show some pictures of their CEOs and things like that, and show you who the real people who are making the discovery, the puppet masters in this world that are really pulling the strings are. Okay, 1 second.
How much, Joe, have you looked at, Larry Fink, Soros, State Street, Vanguard, BlackRock? How much have you looked at what they're doing and what their ties are?
I've looked at it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
They're pretty much running everything.
Yeah.
S&P 500, the number that 88% of the companies on S&P 500, 88% of them, the largest shareholder of those companies is either State Street, BlackRock, or Vanguard. 88% of them, okay? And then you see their influence in defense contracts, okay? So we went through a deal. I'm like, let me see if these guys, this ESG, Larry Fink, Vanguard, State Street, if they have any influence on military contract, defense contracts. If you Google the largest shareholder for Raytheon, 3 out of the 4 top shareholders of Raytheon, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. It could be top 3 with Raytheon, but I think it's 3 out of 4. If you go look up General Dynamics, if you go look up Boeing, if you go look up, Northrop Grumman, okay? And then you work backwards and you say, okay, how much money is that in what these guys are doing? You'll find our, the amount of money we spent in our military, $744 billion on how much we're making from defense, but you'll see some numbers saying last year is 13% of our GDP, which is around $850 billion. That's more than the next 10 combined. We gave more money to Ukraine than Russia spent on their military last year. And when you look at these contracts, then you're like, okay, Fink is there, these guys are there. Okay, let's go look at Hollywood. Same thing you see there. Let's go look at pharmaceutical. Let's go look at this. And you're like, wait a minute. These guys essentially have a monopoly. Well, how big is BlackRock? $10 trillion. How big is $10 trillion? Only 2 countries have a bigger GDP than what BlackRock has, assets under management, US and China. That's how big BlackRock is. So then they went and they started getting all these other guys to sign on and say, hey, we want you to participate with the same thing as well with ESG. And they ended up having, I think they had 31 signers. I think end of 2022, they got 60 something signers for a total of $70 trillion of assets under management that they're controlling. So now they're controlling other places. And just recently, if you saw the rebuilding of Ukraine, did you see this contract? Rebuilding of Ukraine, $400 billion contract. BlackRock and Chase is helping rebuild Ukraine. And then, okay, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but what the hell is going on here? They have that much control to get everybody to do what they want them to do? Yes. So Dylan Mulvaney, who cares? Why? Bud Light. How does that tie up? You got the DEI, the HRC, the human rights, and all this stuff. And then you go even deeper, which is even the crazier part with, the education, schools, like, the biggest union we have in America. I think it's National Education something. NEA is the largest union we have. 3 million teachers are part of that union. And you look at that and you go deeper in that with open society and who's funding it, who's the money behind these organizations. Comes back, Soros. How do you feel about the kind of power they have right now to fight against them? Because this isn't like a billionaire can come out and say, I'm going to go up against these guys. They don't have a little bit of money. A billionaire to these guys is nothing. They got the kind of control that can make companies fire boards. They can replace CEOs. They can replace leaders if they don't like. They have their hands so much into it where many times when people say the people of power, I'm kind of like, who are the people of power? Are you convinced these guys are really running the world? Or what do you think about what some of these bigger companies are doing, like State Street, Vanguard, and BlackRock?
Well, they certainly have massive amounts of influence. What do you think they're doing?
The question is, how do you fight it? Like, for example, the way we fight mainstream is by what? The show that we do. And we have to be patient. It's going to take 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years. Now you have some influence, right? Okay, we can fight. There is an actual strategy on how to fight that. No problem. You got a kid in school who's a bully. He's bigger than you. He keeps bullying you. You have a strategy on how to beat the guy. You take a year, jiu-jitsu 2 years, this, that. Boom. One fight, he knows, I'm never going to touch Joe again. Screw this thing. I'm not doing this no more, right? There is a play to it. When you have this much, Joe, 88% of S&P 500 companies, that is a form of a monopoly. If I'm a president, whether it's a Trump or whoever else goes out there and does it, our monopoly law in America is 50%. They say 50%. Like if you tie and said, at what point is it 50%? I've done calls with the FTC. Like we had one of our guys' technology we were using. The FTC called and said, hey, we want to have a call with you because they're thinking about buying this other technology company and we're worried it's going to be a monopoly. So we had the call, okay? At the end of the call with us, with a bunch of different people, we said, we love their product, we love their product. That deal didn't end up happening, okay? The monopoly law. Some of these guys are influencing it. But they say 50% is a monopoly law. Do you know how many people in America have an iPhone versus Droid? You know what the numbers, market shares in America with iPhones?
I think it's like 60.
58%, 60%. Yeah. That is already a monopoly. But who's knocking on the door of Apple? Tim Cook saying, hey, Tim, you got 58%. That's breaking a monopoly law. Nobody is. I think someone's got to break apart. You know, in 1993, I don't know which senator it was, these guys that were trying to get the defense contractors to be better at the pricing, what they were charging, because they were overcharging DOD, and DOD people don't know what the hell is going on. They're like, yeah, okay, how much? $68 million do it. $1.2 billion do it. I'm not going to over-negotiate the money. They took 51 defense companies, and they brought it down to only 5. It's only 5 companies right now when you want to buy anything. Think about that. So defense contractors is 5. We know how these guys make money. Earlier, you know, I was asking you a question, why do you think vaccine? And you're like, Pat, that's how they make their money, right? I mean, if you and I run a hotel, rooms are empty, we're not making money. We need people to stay in the rooms. If you and I are running a hospital, we need people on the beds to make money.
Yeah.
If there's no people on the beds, we ain't making money. If these 5 contractors are fighting for $744 billion, what do they want more of? Wars. They want more people dying. You know the Papa John's saying, better ingredients, better pizza, Papa John's. Mm-hmm. You know, these guys is more wars, more people dying, more profits, defense contractors, right? That's a valid concern that I have. Because behind closed doors, this whole military-industrial complex, when you look at the numbers, whoever becomes the president, unfortunately, this guy's an anti-establishment president, good. Unfortunately, if you're an anti-establishment president, everyone's going to come after you, especially these military defense contractors. So if a president got up and said, if I'm going to be the president, here's what we're going to be doing. We have to look at all the contracts. You can't overcharge us. We have to open it up. You have to sell some of your companies. You have to let them be independent again. You have to do this. You have to let them go public, separate, whatever way you got to break them apart to have competition again, because we don't have that today. You know, so that is a major concern where we say we have a commander-in-chief, but really the commander-in-chief is Larry Fink today. The guy running BlackRock is really the president of the United States. If we look at the kind of influence he's got in every industry, Joe. And he's like, well, I kind of feel bad. I'm ashamed that all the weaponization, the word, ESG is being used and all this other stuff. And Elon tweeted about the ESG. I don't know if you remember when Elon tweeted about ESG, saying the S in ESG is satanic. Okay? So this is a part where even a Charlie Munger, who is Warren Buffett's partner, says, look, I love Larry Fink, but I'm not interested in having an emperor. Some words like that he said about Larry Fink. So this motive, and by the way, Larry Fink is an interesting guy because he majored in college political science. His aspirations was politics. He accidentally got into money, and he learned to trade, and then he lost $100 million at 36 years old, I think, and then he teams up with Schwartzman, and they start this company, and after a couple years, they got $5 billion under management, $8 billion, and $32 billion, and then they have a difference because, he wants to give equity, and Jamie's, Schwartzman's like, no, and then they separate. But influence of politics, you get into business, you're a billionaire, it's you, Soros. So I'm extremely concerned about what these guys are up to. And we think our president is the most powerful person. That person's not. Because behind closed doors, they're going to be like, look, guys, let's relax. That guy's only going to be there for 4 to 8 years. We're going to be all right. He'll be out. We're running the world. We're okay. We were running America, but now we're running the world. We control all the ETFs in America. We're controlling all this stuff. Everyone has to come through us, and we can tell everybody what to do because everybody fears not getting money from us, from being downgraded. A Tesla on ESG score is nothing, but if Philip Morris gets an A rating, how the hell the company that's Philip Morris has a better environmental social governance score, DEI, not DEI, but the CEI, the score they give it over Tesla. So they can bully some of these guys.
Let me ask you this. What do you think the goal of ESG is? Why do you think they're establishing these sort of parameters? Like, why is ESG a thing, and what's the benefit of it for them?
So Schultz said something very interesting. Schultz says, look, these guys are driven by money. They're not going to do anything to destroy an economy to lose their own money because they want that. I said, okay, so very good. Andrew Schultz. I said, that's a very good point, on what you're saying. Fine. So, you know how sometimes Michael Jackson, you see the interview with him with kids. Oh, they're just sleeping in the bed. That's all it is. And we're just having a great time, and we're storytelling. And like, yeah, bro, I get it. It's a little weird. You got a 7, 8-year-old, 10-year-old kid sleeping in your bed and, all this stuff. And it's a little bit fishy what you're talking about here. It's not normal. Well, if you're in Hollywood and you've slept with as many people as these people sleep, and then eventually you have to have other options because what else do you do? You have to try new things. How many threesomes have you had? How many this? How many that? So you start trying all these other things, and sometimes these guys go to such and such place. Doesn't matter. It's kind of weird and fishy, right, on what you want to do. Great. Okay. So why are these guys doing what they're doing? You have all the money in the world. You live in a $100 million house. Not you, Larry Fink and some of these guys. I don't know if he lives in a $100 million house, but you got the money to live in a $100 million. What else do you need?
Right.
You got nice cars. Jamie Dimon's got a $900 million art collection, according to an article. It's a nice art collection, right? You go to all the nice restaurants. You meet prime ministers. You meet presidents. And then maybe there comes a time when you're looking at a couple of these guys, they're presidents and prime ministers, and you tell yourself, I'd be a better president than you, bro. How the hell am I not reading the country? Or they tell themselves, you think you're a president? You're not a president. You work for me. What else is the motive?
But ESG, how does that factor into
But the point is control is what I'm saying. So the motive becomes control more than money. After you have all the money in the world, what's next? It's got to be control or a true vision. So Soros, when you're talking ESG, that story is a completely different story. You ever heard Soros' interview with 60 Minutes where he says, I see myself as a god? Have you ever seen this interview or what he says?
No.
Really?
He said he sees himself as a god.
Oh, my God. Jamie, do you mind pulling up the quote? I think it's, if you type in LA Times, Soros, God. If you type in LA Times, Soros, God, when you hear what he says, it's like the second to the last paragraph all the way to the bottom. The guy asks a question, about who he views himself as. I want to quote it properly, exactly what he says in this
Is there a
interview.
video of him saying this?
Yeah, a 60-minute. There's a video as well. So if you go all the way to the bottom, go a little bit higher. Go a little bit higher in the quote. About next to my friends, no, go a little higher. I think it's a little higher. I'm kind of keep going higher. Sort of a demonstration. Keep going higher. Keep going higher. Keep going higher. Prevailing values. A little higher. A little higher. There's a part where he says, "Keep going." What year is this article, by the way? Is this it's an old article. It's supposed to be
2004.
That's the one. This is the one. Okay, right there. It seems that Soros believes he was anointed by God. I fancied myself as some kind of a god. If truth be known, I carried some rather potent messianic fantasies with me from childhood, which I felt I had to control, otherwise they might get me in trouble. And then on the next line, when asked by Britain's independent newspaper to elaborate on the passage, Soros says, it is sort of a disease when you consider yourself some kind of a god, the creator of everything, but I feel comfortable about it now since I began to live it out.
All right, so the reason why I let that whole Joe Rogan clip play is because it's very disturbing, right? And I don't think me talking about how corrupt and how disgustingly connected the military-industrial complex is to all the problems that are existing in this world are, without playing some evidence. So when you start to see all these connections over this next few months of the UFO situation, UAP situation, and who's really driving the whole thing is being driven by these secret, disgustingly large. BlackRock has $10 trillion under management. That's the third largest GDP of any country in the world behind the United States and China. It's a private corporation. How are you supposed to deal with that that should be, no person should have that much power, guys. So I just want to put up a couple pictures of these rich dudes that we're talking about here, just so you can have some faces to their names, and then I'll close this out because it's a lot of food for thought. It's a little longer of a video, but I hope you guys got a lot out of it. Hold on one second. All right, so real quick, just so you can see some of these rich white guys that are controlling the world. George Soros, the CEO of the Vanguard Group, Joseph Buckley, and then the most powerful of them all, Larry Fink, who is controlling a company that has the third highest GDP, who would be controlling a company who has $10 trillion under control, and the amount of influence they have is disgusting. What do they have in common? They're all rich white people living in their castles who are controlling the world, thinking that they know what's best for all of us, which we know is BS, right? So the other thing that I thought was fascinating about this is that the 88% of the S&P 500 is controlled by 4 companies, right? Is that sick? The Vanguard Group, BlackRock, State Street. It's insane, right? I just can't fathom. So the point of I started out with this being from President Eisenhower talking about the military-industrial complex and how dangerous it can be and what it's going to become. Well, now you extrapolate that 70 years later, right? 2023, and this is what we have. We have this Vanguards, State Street, Raytheons, BlackRocks, Boeings, Northrop Grumman, all these companies that are just out of control because of these disgustingly, ridiculously secretive groups that have taken over. We have the secret government that nobody knows about yet, which will come out soon, right, in these next few hearings, and hopefully it's peaceful. And then we have this disgustingly compartmentalized secret national defense real government, right, which is disgusting. So the whole thing is gross. And as people, what do? That's the point of this whole thing. BelloHeart is about full transparency, exposing the truth, and I hope that this helps connect some of the dots that need to be connected in your head, because the Petrodollars really put it over the edge for me, and I hope it does the same for you. Appreciate you joining me. Please like and subscribe, BelloHeart, and thank you for watching. I hope you have a great night, and remember, it's about spreading love, but to spread love, you need to spread truth. And to expose the darkness, see if they shine the light on it, right? So that's what we're doing. We're shining a light on the darkness of this world so we can expose it and then fix it. But most importantly, spread the love. BelloHeart out.